A werewolf romance by the Alpha's Claim Collection. Prologue. They say the moon goddess never makes mistakes. They say every rejection, every loss, every moment of unbearable pain is part of a design too large for ordinary wolves to comprehend. They say surrender to the plan. Trust the thread. Believe that whatever the universe pulls away from you, it pulls away for a reason. I used to believe that. I used to stand under the full moon with my hands open and my heart exposed and believe with everything I had that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Loved. Chosen. Home. I was wrong. Not about the moon goddess. Not about the plan. I was wrong about the man I thought I was part of it with. My name is Nadia Voss. For 3 years I was Luna of the Ironblood Pack, the most feared and respected territory in the northern region. I sat beside an alpha who told me I was his forever. I poured myself into his pack, his people, his vision, until I couldn't tell where he ended and I began. And then one morning, in the rain, in front of everyone I had ever led and loved and bled for, that same alpha stood on the steps of the home we shared and had me stripped of everything. My title. My place. My name. He didn't even look at me when he did it. What Cole Voss never knew, what I never got the chance to tell him, was that when those gates closed behind me, I wasn't walking away alone. I was walking away with the most powerful secret in the werewolf world growing quietly inside me. And by the time he figured that out, it was already too late. This is the story of how I was broken in public, rebuilt in private, and returned as something no one, least of all Cole, ever saw coming. This is the story of my greatest punishment, my fiercest love, and the child who changed everything. This is the story of the Alpha's greatest mistake. And it starts, as all the worst things do, on what should have been the happiest day of my life. Before we jump into today's story, I have to ask, where in the world are you listening from right now? Drop your location and the time in the comments below. Is it early morning in New York and you're already reaching for something that will wreck you emotionally before breakfast? Midday in London with your lunch going cold because you can't pause? Late night in Toronto wrapped in a blanket pretending you'll sleep soon? Evening in Sydney with a cup of tea that's been forgotten? I genuinely love seeing how far this community stretches. Every comment reminds me that broken hearts and fierce comebacks are a language the whole world speaks. If you are ready for a story about a woman who was stripped of everything she loved, banished in the rain while carrying a secret that would have changed everything, and who came back 7 months later as something no one, especially the man who threw her away, ever saw coming, then show this story some love. Hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a new audiobook drop. Today's story has betrayal that will make your jaw drop, a pregnancy twist that will make you gasp, a protector who redefines what a real partner looks like, and a reckoning so perfectly delivered it will have you rewinding just to hear it again. This is Nadia's story. And I promise you, she was worth every single second of the wait. Alright loves, let's begin. Chapter 1. What the Rain Knows. You are hereby stripped of your title as Luna. By the authority of the Alpha, you are banished from Ironblood Pack territory. Effective. Immediately. The words landed like stones thrown into still water, each one sending a ripple outward through the 200 pack members gathered in the courtyard. Nadia felt them before she fully processed them. Felt the collective flinch of the crowd, the sharp collective intake of breath, the weight of 200 pairs of eyes swinging toward her like a single living thing. It was raining. Of course it was raining. She stood in the center of the pack courtyard in her white Luna ceremonial dress, the one she had been asked to wear this morning for what she was told was a pack unity ceremony. The fabric was soaked through now, clinging to her skin, heavy as grief. Her dark hair plastered against her cheeks. The cold so complete she had stopped feeling it somewhere around the second sentence. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She looked up at the steps of the pack house where Cole stood. Alpha Cole Voss. Her mate. Her chosen. The man whose name she had taken 3 years ago under a full moon while the entire pack howled their blessing into a sky so clear it looked like a painting. He was looking somewhere slightly above her head. Not at her. Not quite. The way you look at a wall when you're saying something you don't want to feel. And beside him, Nadia's gaze moved slowly, involuntarily, the way your tongue finds a broken tooth. Beside Cole, standing half a step behind his right shoulder in the exact position that had always been Nadia's, stood Sierra, her best friend. Sierra, who had been in Nadia's wedding ceremony. Sierra, who had held her hand through every difficult year of learning to lead a pack that hadn't chosen her. Sierra, who had sat across from her at breakfast this very morning and looked her directly in the eye and said, "You look beautiful today, Nadia." Sierra was wearing Nadia's Luna pendant. The one Cole had clasped around Nadia's neck on their mating night. The one he had told her carried the Voss bloodline blessing, passed from Luna to Luna for 6 generations. The one she had never once removed, not even to sleep. It hung at Sierra's throat now, catching the gray morning light. And just like that, the last piece of a puzzle Nadia hadn't known she was solving clicked quietly into place. The late nights Cole spent in strategy meetings that produced no new strategies. The way Sierra had started arriving at the pack house earlier and staying later. The small intimacies Nadia had noticed and buried, a shared look, a private laugh. The way Sierra always seemed to know things about Cole's mood before Nadia did. The way Cole had stopped reaching for her in the dark 3 months ago, and she had told herself it was stress, it was leadership, it was the pressure of running the most contested territory in the north. It hadn't been any of those things. Her hand moved before she could stop it. Down, slow and automatic, to her stomach. The gesture lasted less than 2 seconds. She pulled her hand back immediately, pressing it flat against her thigh. Nobody noticed. The crowd was too busy processing the announcement, too busy watching Cole's face for cues on how to react. Even Sierra, whose eyes had been tracking Nadia with the hungry attention of someone watching for the moment they finally break, was looking at Cole. Nobody saw. But Nadia felt it. Felt the small, devastating truth of it. The weight of what she carried that had nothing to do with the sodden dress, or the rain-soaked hair, or the 200 witnesses to her public unmaking. "He doesn't know," her wolf said softly from somewhere deep inside her chest. "He threw you away, and he doesn't even know what he just destroyed." Elder Holt, 70 years old, pack council head, a man Nadia had served tea to every Thursday morning for 3 years, stepped forward with a formal document. His expression was carefully neutral in the way that meant he had practiced it. "The council has voted," he said. "The decision is unanimous. Alpha Voss's former mate is to vacate the territory within the hour. Pack members are reminded that offering shelter, resources, or assistance to a declared rogue wolf is a violation of pack law. Rogue wolf. Not former Luna. Not Nadia. Not even her name. Rogue wolf." She looked at Cole one more time, waiting, despite herself, for something. A flicker. A fracture in the careful blankness of his face. Some evidence that the man who had pressed his lips to her temple every morning for 3 years and whispered, "My constant," into her hair was still somewhere inside the Alpha standing on those steps. Cole looked at the document in Elder Holt's hand. Not at her. Never at her. "You have 1 hour," he said. His voice was the same voice he used in council meetings. Measured. Final. The voice of a man who had already moved on before the conversation ended. Nadia turned around. She walked toward the gate. Each step deliberate. Her spine straight. Her chin level. Her wolf screaming inside her with a sound like tearing metal, but she walked like the Luna she still was in every way that mattered, because she would not give them the satisfaction of watching her stumble. The crowd parted. She kept her eyes forward and did not look at a single face. The gates opened. She walked through. They closed behind her with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. She made it to the tree line before her legs gave out. Not from weakness. Her body simply reached a point where continuing upright required more resources than she currently possessed, and it made a practical decision on her behalf. She caught herself against the trunk of an oak, both hands gripping bark, forehead pressed against wet wood, and stood there for a long moment just breathing. The rain came down through the canopy in cold, irregular drips. Her wolf had gone quiet. The screaming had stopped somewhere around the gate and been replaced by something worse, a low, hollow silence, the sound of a creature that has been hurt so profoundly it hasn't yet decided whether to fight or simply fold. Nadia reached into the hidden pocket of the ruined white dress, a seamstress alteration she had requested herself when she first became Luna, because she believed a woman in any position of power should always have somewhere to put her hands that the room couldn't see. She pulled out the pregnancy test. She'd taken it 4 days ago in the bathroom of a human pharmacy 2 towns over, heart hammering, hands shaking, telling herself she was probably wrong and simultaneously knowing with the bone-deep certainty of her wolf that she absolutely wasn't. She'd sat on a closed toilet lid in a floral wallpapered bathroom that smelled of lavender and disinfectant and watched 2 pink lines appear with a clarity that left no room for misinterpretation. 2 lines. She'd wrapped it in tissue and put it in her pocket and driven home in silence, running through exactly how she would tell Cole. The setting. The words. Whether to make it a moment or keep it simple and quiet, and just the 2 of them, the way they used to be in the beginning, before leadership made everything formal. She'd never found the right moment. She found the right moment. She pressed her thumb over the small window. The 2 pink lines were still perfectly visible despite everything. Still certain. Still true. In a morning that had dismantled every single thing she thought she knew, these 2 lines remained stubbornly, immovably real. Okay, she said aloud to no one. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Okay, think. She was in the forest bordering Ironblood's eastern territory. She had the clothes on her back, soaked through and useless. No bag, no phone, no money. Elder Holt had been very specific that the banishment included pack-affiliated property, which apparently extended to the phone Cole had given her. What she had was a pregnancy test, a hidden pocket, and spite. Her wolf stirred. The hollow silence cracked open slightly, and through the crack came something small and hot and stubborn. "You are not allowed to die here," her wolf said. The voice was quiet, but it was firm. Not like this. Not for him. Not in a wet dress in a forest, leaking into the dirt while he goes inside to warm himself by a fire you used to tend. Get up. Nadia pushed off the tree. She stood. She looked back once toward the gates, the solid iron walls of the territory she had given 3 years of her life to, and then she turned north and started walking. She had been walking for 20 minutes, her soaked shoes making sounds she chose not to think about, when the undergrowth behind her moved and Beta Ryan stepped onto the path. Ryan Marsh. Cole's second. 30 years old, built like someone had constructed him specifically for blocking doorways, with a face that was simultaneously difficult to read and impossible to distrust. He had been the first pack member to welcome her when she arrived as Cole's mate, shaking her hand with both of his and saying, about time he brought someone home who looks like she'd survive an argument with him. He wasn't supposed to be here. You're going to get yourself sanctioned, Nadia said without turning around. Probably, Ryan agreed, falling into step beside her. He was carrying a bag. He held it out. Dry clothes. Money my own, nothing pack-affiliated, so Holt can't touch it. A phone with a charged battery and 1 contact saved under the name Ashford. Nadia stopped walking. She looked at the bag, then at Ryan's face. How long have you known? Ryan was quiet for 3 seconds too long. Ryan. 2 months, he said. I found out 2 months ago. I tried to talk him out of it. I tried 6 separate times to make him see what he was doing. His jaw worked. He'd already decided, Nadia. Before I ever said a word. Sierra had already gotten into his head, and I couldn't get him out. The information settled over her like the rain. Cold. Thorough. Inevitable. The unfaithfulness claim, she said. He told the elders I'd been unfaithful. Ryan's expression confirmed it without a word. Sierra found the pregnancy test. The one in my jewelry box. Nadia's voice was completely flat. She showed it to Cole. He said, Ryan stopped. Tell me. He said. And I'm telling you this because you deserve the truth, not to hurt you, he said. Whose is it? Because it's not mine. I haven't touched her in months. The words went in clean and deep, the way the coldest blades do. Nadia didn't flinch. She'd already used up her capacity for flinching on the courtyard steps. He told the elders I was carrying another wolf's pup, she said. Yes. And they voted to banish me on the basis of that claim. Yes. Without asking me. Ryan looked at her. His eyes were the eyes of a man who has watched something terrible happen in slow motion and will carry the weight of not stopping it for the rest of his life. Yes, he said quietly. Nadia took the bag. She looked down at it for a moment. Then she looked at Ryan, at the guilt written plainly across his face, the soldier's grief of a man caught between loyalty and conscience, the particular exhaustion of someone who tried and failed and has to live inside that failure. This isn't your fault, she said. Nadia. It isn't. You didn't do this. You tried to stop it. She pulled the bag strap over her shoulder. But I need you to do one more thing for me. Anything. She met his eyes. Tell me about the contact. The one called Ashford. Something shifted in Ryan's expression. Not quite relief. Not quite fear. Something in between. Zane Ashford, he said carefully. Alpha of the Ashford sector. Neutral territory. He's been a pause. I've been in contact with him about Ironblood's border violations. Feeding him information. He's been waiting to see how things developed before he made any moves. How long? For months. Nadia absorbed this. Ryan had been building an exit long before she needed one. Some part of her noted that and filed it somewhere important. Is he trustworthy? He's the most honest man I've ever dealt with. Which, from an alpha, is genuinely alarming. Ryan almost smiled. He won't pretend to help you and mean something else. If he offers you something, it's what he says it is. Why would he help me? Because he's been watching Cole make bad decisions for 2 years, and he's strategic enough to understand that Cole's greatest mistake just walked out of his gates carrying something that changes everything, even if he doesn't know the specifics yet. Nadia looked down at her stomach, then back at Ryan. He doesn't know about the pregnancy. No. She nodded slowly. Okay. She pulled the phone from the bag, found the contact, looked at it. Ryan placed a hand briefly on her shoulder. The gesture was brief and careful and said everything that was too large for words right now. Be safe, he said. And Nadia, he glanced at her stomach, and she realized he had probably known for weeks with the particular awareness of someone who had watched her carefully enough to notice the changes she'd been hiding. Whatever you're carrying, protect it. Don't let him take that from you too. He turned and walked back toward the tree line. Nadia watched him go. Then she looked at the phone. She dialed. It rang once. A voice answered, deep, unhurried, carrying the faint texture of someone who had been awake for a long time and found no particular reason to perform alertness. I was wondering when someone from Ironblood would finally call me. Chapter 2. The warmth of honest people. The rain stopped an hour before Zane Ashford found her. Nadia had been walking north for 90 minutes, long enough to find the boundary markers Ryan had described, long enough for the ceremonial dress to dry into something stiff and faintly absurd, long enough for the initial shock to metabolize into a focused, narrow energy that she recognized as her wolf's survival mode. Not comfort. Not acceptance. Just forward momentum, stripped of everything unnecessary. She heard him before she saw him. Not footsteps, he was too quiet for that, but a shift in the atmosphere of the forest, the way the trees seemed to register a presence that carried its own weight. He stepped from between 2 pines and stopped. Zane Ashford was not what she had built in her mind during the walk. She'd expected something like Cole. Broad authority, deliberate dominance, the physical vocabulary of a man who had spent years ensuring everyone in every room understood immediately who held the most power in it. What she got was a man in a dark coat standing in the clearing with his hands in his pockets, looking at her with the direct, unperforming attention of someone who has nowhere else to be and no particular need to impress. He was tall. Dark-haired, sharp-featured, with amber eyes that caught the gray afternoon light and held it longer than seemed natural. Not conventionally assembled for intimidation, though she suspected he was perfectly capable of it. He simply didn't appear to be doing it right now. He looked at her, all of her, the ruined dress, the bare feet where she'd abandoned the destroyed shoes 40 minutes back, the posture she was maintaining through pure stubbornness. And he didn't do any of the things she was braced for. He didn't express sympathy. Didn't soften his face into performed compassion. Didn't offer the particular brand of careful gentleness that is really just condescension dressed up in kind clothes. He reached into his coat and held out an umbrella. It had stopped raining. Nadia stared at it. "I was told to bring it," Zane said. His voice in person was the same as on the phone. Unhurried, with a dry undertone of something that wasn't quite amusement, but lived in the same neighborhood. It seemed like the kind of morning where having one would have helped. The rain stopped. Yes. Unfortunately, I wasn't here for the rain. Despite everything, despite the dress and the courtyard and the pendant at Sierra's throat, something loosened, very slightly, in Nadia's chest. Not warmth exactly. More like the recognition of something genuine in a morning that had contained nothing but performance. She didn't take the umbrella. "Ryan says you're honest," she said. "Ryan is generous." Zane put the umbrella back inside his coat with the ease of someone who had expected this outcome. "I'm strategic." The overlap with honest is significant, but not total. What's outside the overlap? He considered her for a moment. "I'm going to tell you that my reasons for helping you are not entirely altruistic. Most honest people would have waited until you were warm and fed before mentioning that. Most honest people would have let me walk to the border myself." "True." He tilted his head slightly. "Can you walk another 20 minutes, or do you need to stop?" "I can walk." "Good. Because I'd offered to carry you, and I suspect you'd find that offensive." "Deeply." "Then let's go." He turned north without waiting for agreement, hands back in his pockets, pace set at something that required effort without demanding it. Nadia fell into step beside him, and for a while there was just the sound of the forest settling around them and the distant sound of the territory she had just left growing quieter behind her. "How did you know I'd called?" she asked after a minute. "Ryan sent a message ahead. He does that. Gives people just enough runway to prepare without scripting the meeting. He didn't tell me he'd done that." "No, he wouldn't." A pause. "He's been watching out for you in the ways he could. He's a good man in a bad situation. He'll get out of it eventually when the guilt gets heavier than the loyalty." Nadia looked at him sideways. "You sound certain." "I've been watching Ironblood's decisions for 2 years. Ryan Marsh is the only person in that inner circle who's made consistently sound ones. People like that don't stay in collapsing structures. They just take time to leave." "You think Ironblood is collapsing?" "I think Ironblood is being run by a man who just traded his most valuable asset for a comfortable lie." He said it without inflection, factual as weather. "That has a historical outcome. It's not complicated." Nadia was quiet for a moment. "You don't know what the asset is," she said carefully. "No," Zane agreed. "But I'm about to." The Ashford territory announced itself not with gates or walls, but with a change in the trees themselves, older growth here, massive and unhurried, the forest floor clean and deep with decades of undisturbed leaf fall. The pack house came into view through the pines. A large, low building of dark stone and timber, built into the landscape rather than imposed on it, warm light bleeding from every window against the gray afternoon. It looked, Nadia thought, like somewhere people actually lived. A woman was waiting on the steps. 60s, compact, silver-haired, with the particular kind of sharp eyes that see past the face you're presenting to the one underneath. She was wearing practical clothes and an expression of professional assessment so thorough that Nadia felt briefly transparent. "Marin," Zane said. "This is Nadia." "I can see that," Marin said. She came down the steps, ignoring ceremony entirely, and took Nadia's face briefly in both hands with the no-nonsense intimacy of a healer who has long since stopped asking permission for what needs doing. She looked at Nadia's eyes, her color, the tension in her jaw. Then her gaze dropped for exactly 1 second to Nadia's stomach, and something moved through her expression too quickly to name. She released Nadia's face. "Come inside," she said. "Eat first. Then I need to examine you." "I'm fine," Nadia said automatically. Marin looked at her with the expression of someone who has been told, "I'm fine," by people actively bleeding. "Inside," she repeated. The kitchen was warm and smelled of wood smoke and something slow-cooked and substantial. Someone had left food on the table, real food, the kind that requires time and attention, without being asked. Nadia sat down and ate without ceremony, past the point of pretending she wasn't ravenous, and nobody commented or watched or made it significant. Zane sat across from her with coffee and said nothing. Marin moved quietly around the kitchen's edges, preparing what Nadia recognized as a healer's wear bag. Halfway through the meal, Nadia realized her hands had stopped shaking. She hadn't noticed them shaking until they stopped. "Tell me about the Ashford sector," she said. Zane set down his coffee. "Neutral territory, 30 miles across at its widest point. No formal pack allegiance. I run it as an independent sector under the old territorial laws, which means no Alpha Council authority over my decisions. 3 packs border us, Ironblood to the south, Greyfen to the west, Bloodmarked to the east. All 3 have been making incremental claims on our boundary lines for the past 18 months. Why? Because neutral territory is only respected as long as the entity holding it is perceived as strong enough to enforce it. They've decided I'm not. Are you? Currently? It's complicated." He turned his coffee cup a quarter turn on the table, a small, precise movement. Politically, a sitting alpha with a strong bloodline mate is difficult to challenge under the old laws. The claiming protections are substantial. Without that, he paused. "I'm managing, but the margin is narrowing." Nadia looked at him steadily. "You need a mate for political protection. I told you the overlap between honest and strategic isn't total. And you think I'm useful because Cole Voss just publicly rejected and banished a 3-year Luna who has been managing one of the most contested packs in the north." Zane met her eyes. "Whatever his reasons for doing that, his competence in doing it is telling. He didn't think you were a threat. He thought you were a loss he could absorb." "He was wrong," Nadia said. "Yes," Zane said simply. "He was." Marin reappeared. "When you're finished eating," she said to Nadia, "come through to the examination room." The room was small and clean and smelled of herbs Nadia recognized from her own pack's healer. Mountain sage, silverwort, the particular sharp green scent of moonleaf, which was used for one thing and one thing only in healer's practice. Pregnancy examination. Nadia sat on the edge of the table. "You already know. I suspected the moment I saw you on the steps." Marin settled onto a low stool across from her, unhurried. "May I?" Nadia nodded. Marin placed both hands over Nadia's stomach. Her palms were warm. A soft gold light built slowly between her hands and the fabric of Nadia's borrowed shirt. Zane had handed her dry clothes without comment somewhere between the kitchen and here, and Nadia felt the familiar warmth of healer sight moving through her, gentle and thorough as water finding its level. Marin was quiet for a long time. The gold light deepened, changed color almost imperceptibly, moving from soft gold toward something richer, brighter, with a faint pulse to it that Nadia had never seen healer light do before. Marin's hands went very still. "How many healers have examined you since conception?" she asked. "None. I only found out 4 days ago." "And the pack's documentation of your bloodline goes back how far?" Nadia frowned. 5 generations on my mother's side." "Why?" Marin lifted her hands. The light faded. She sat back on her stool and looked at Nadia with an expression that was doing a great deal of careful work to remain professional. "What?" Nadia said. "Your pup," Marin began. "Pups." The word surprised Nadia as it left her mouth. She hadn't known she was going to say it. But her wolf had gone very still in the way that meant she already knew. "It's more than one." Marin paused. "One," she said gently. "But what one?" She leaned forward. "Nadia, what I'm about to tell you is significant. I need you to hear all of it before you respond. Tell me, your child carries a blood mark." The words landed quietly. Nadia knew the term, every wolf did, in the abstract, the way you know the name of a star you've never seen. Bloodmarked pups were spoken of in pack history, in old stories, in the kind of reverent tones reserved for things that almost never actually happen. "That's not possible," Nadia said. "It's rare," Marin said. "1 in several generations, perhaps. It can only be detected in the womb by a healer trained in old bloodline reading. No standard test would show it. No pack healer working with modern methods would even know to look. She held Nadia's gaze. This child is going to be the most powerful wolf born in this generation. Possibly in 50 years. The blood mark indicates a natural-born alpha heir of the highest order, the kind of wolf around whom history organizes itself. Pack leadership, territorial dominance, the ability to command wolves who aren't even pack-bonded. Nadia was very quiet. Cole doesn't know, she said finally. Cole, Marin said, with a precision that carried no cruelty but considerable weight, made the worst mistake of his life this morning. And he did it without even knowing the half of it. The silence in the room was complete and full. Then Nadia asked the question that changed everything. What would he do if he found out? Marin's expression answered before her words. The professional composure didn't crack, but her eyes said what needed saying. The answer was not small, and it was not kind, and it was not a future Nadia wanted to walk toward. The door opened. Zane stood in the frame. Still. Listening. His amber eyes moved between Marin and Nadia with an attention that said he had been standing there long enough to hear more than the last question. We have a problem, he said. His voice was level. Which, Nadia was already beginning to understand, was how Zane Ashford sounded when things were genuinely serious. Cole has declared you a rogue wolf. Official pack notification sent to all bordering territories as of 20 minutes ago. A pause. He's sent trackers. Nadia looked at him, then at Marin, then back at him. How long before they reach the border? At pack speed? For hours. Maybe 3. Nadia stood up from the examination table. She felt something settle in her body. A realignment, the particular physical sensation of a decision being made before the mind has finished catching up to it. Then we have 3 hours, she said. Tell me everything I need to know about the old territorial laws. Specifically the ones about claimed mates and rogue classification. Zane looked at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression, not surprise exactly, but a recalibration. The look of someone updating an estimate. You're not going to run, he said. I'm done running, Nadia said. I walked out of those gates. That was the last retreat I'm making. She met his eyes. Now tell me what you know. Because if there's a law that protects me and this child, I need to understand it before those trackers arrive. And then she paused. Then we need to have a different conversation about what exactly you're proposing and what I need in return. Zane was quiet for 3 seconds. Then he almost smiled. A small, precise thing, there and gone, but real. Marin, he said, not looking away from Nadia, bring the law books. The old ones. Marin was already moving. Chapter 3. The old laws. The law books were ancient. Not metaphorically ancient, actually ancient. Leather-bound volumes the color of dried blood, their spines cracked and soft with handling, their pages so thin that the words printed on them showed through to the next page like ghosts of themselves. Marin stacked 6 of them on the kitchen table and stepped back with the expression of someone who has just armed a person and wants to be clear that what happens next is not their responsibility. Zane pulled the top volume open with the ease of someone familiar with it. Nadia sat across from him. She had changed into the dry clothes, dark trousers, a simple gray shirt, and someone, she suspected Marin, had left a pair of soft boots by the examination room door in exactly her size. The ceremonial dress was gone. She hadn't watched it go and didn't intend to think about it again. The Rogue Classification Act, Zane said, finding the page without searching. Established 400 years ago, revised twice, once 200 years ago, once 50. Under current law, a wolf declared rogue by a sitting alpha is denied territorial protection in any affiliated pack land. They cannot be sheltered, resourced, or claimed by any pack member without the original alpha's written consent. That's what Holt read this morning, Nadia said. Mostly. Zane turned a page. What Holt didn't read, because it doesn't benefit Cole for anyone to know it, is the exemption written into the original act. Section 12, paragraph 4. He turned the book to face her. Nadia leaned forward and read. A rogue classification is rendered void and without legal standing upon the formal claiming of the designated rogue by a sitting alpha of independent territory, provided said claiming is witnessed by a pack healer of standing and documented in the territorial record within 72 hours of the original classification. She read it twice. Independent territory, she said. Neutral territory falls under that definition. The Ashford sector qualifies. Cole can't override it? Not under the old laws. And because I operate under old territorial law by charter, he can't use the modern Pack Council to challenge it either. Different legal framework entirely. Zane closed the book with a soft, final sound. If I claim you formally, his rogue declaration evaporates. The trackers have no legal authority to touch you. Nadia sat back. Her mind was moving quickly, sorting through implications, looking for the angles she couldn't yet see. And the blood mark. What about it? If Cole finds out about the blood mark, when Cole finds out, he's going to want the child. Not for love. She said the last 3 words without bitterness, just fact. For power. A blood-marked heir running Ironblood territory would make him untouchable. He'd have every legal and political justification to pursue custody. Under Pack law, biological paternity gives him a claim, Zane said carefully. Unless? He met her eyes. Unless the child is formally claimed by another sitting alpha before birth. Under the old laws, a pre-birth claiming supersedes biological paternity in cases where the biological father has issued a formal rejection of the mother. A pause, which Cole documented this morning with the rogue declaration. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, wind moved through the old pines, a long slow sound like breathing. You've been thinking about this since you heard Marin, Nadia said. I've been thinking about parts of it for 2 years, Zane said. The specifics became clear in the last hour. Then say what you're actually proposing. Zane folded his hands on the table. It was a precise, deliberate gesture, a man arranging himself to say something he intends to mean. I'm proposing a formal mating claim, he said. Witnessed, documented, legally binding under the old laws. In exchange, you receive full territorial protection for yourself and the child. The rogue classification dies. Cole's paternity claim dies with it. Your child is born as an Ashford heir and grows up with the protection of that bloodline and this territory behind them. And you receive? Political stability. The 3 packs pressing my borders back off when I take a mate. The old laws on that are unambiguous. An alpha in claimed partnership cannot be challenged for territorial acquisition without cause. That's the transaction, Nadia said. Now tell me the rest. Something moved in Zane's expression. A door opening slightly that she hadn't known was closed. I want a real partner, he said. Not a political prop. Not a face at ceremonies. He said it without flourish, without the speech quality she might have expected. Just words, plainly meant. I've watched decorated arrangements hollow people out. I run this territory on honesty, and I won't build a lie into its foundation. Which means you sit in council meetings. You learn the territory's politics, its alliances, its vulnerabilities. You train with my warriors. You make real decisions and I listen to them. You are, in every way that matters, actually here. Not performing being here. Nadia looked at him for a long moment. You'd give all of that to a woman you met an hour ago. I'd give all of that to the woman Ryan Marsh crossed Pack law to help escape. A pause. He's a careful man. He doesn't take risks without reason. You're worth the risk. You don't know that. Not yet, Zane agreed. But I'm willing to find out. Nadia stood and walked to the window. The Ashford forest spread outward from the pack house, deep and old and unhurried. A pack member crossed the yard below, a young woman, carrying something, pausing to exchange words with another wolf near the tree-line. The exchange looked easy, unguarded. The body language of people who didn't feel watched. She thought about Cole's pack house. The way pack members moved through it like people in a room where the temperature could change without warning. The careful management of every word and expression in Cole's presence. The relief she had learned to read on people's faces when they left. She had spent 3 years telling herself that was normal. That all packs operated in that frequency of low-grade tension. That she was simply not yet accustomed to the culture. My conditions, she said, still looking out the window. Tell me. She turned. I want full access to the territorial law library. Everything, not a curated selection. I've been making decisions in other people's frameworks my entire adult life because I was never given the actual rules. I want the actual rules. Done. I want your honest assessment of every situation, even when it's not what I'd prefer to hear. Especially then. That one will occasionally be uncomfortable for both of us. Good. That means it's working. Something in Zane's expression shifted, a small, precise recalibration that she was beginning to recognize as his version of approval. Third, Nadia said, my child's story is their own. When they are old enough to understand it, they are told the truth, all of it. Who their biological father is. What he did. What we built from it. They decide what to do with that truth. Not us. Zane was quiet for a moment. That's a significant condition. I know. Cole is going to be part of that story whether we want him to be or not. Yes, Nadia said. He is. But I won't build my child's life on a lie and call it protection. Protection built on deception is just a prettier cage. Another silence. Then Zane nodded, once, slowly. Agreed. And fourth. Nadia held his gaze. When Cole comes and you said yourself he will, I face him. Not from behind you. Not as someone who needs to be shielded from her own past. Beside you, at equal height, on my own terms. Whatever that confrontation is, it's mine to have. Zane studied her. You're already thinking about how it ends. I'm thinking about how I need it to end, Nadia said. There's a difference. He stood. Extended his hand across the table, not the ceremonial gesture of a formal claiming, just the plain, human offer of a hand from one person to another. Then we have a deal, he said. Nadia looked at his hand. She thought about the last hand she had trusted across a table. Then she set that thought down deliberately, the way you set down something heavy, and she took Zane's hand. His grip was firm and even and asked nothing beyond what the gesture meant. We have a deal, she said. Naren performed the claiming documentation 40 minutes later. Swift, formal, witnessed, recorded in the territorial ledger with the date and time and the seal of the Ashford sector pressed in dark wax at the bottom of the page. When it was done, she handed Nadia a copy and kept 2 others for the record. The trackers will reach the border in an hour, Zane said, reading a message from the phone that hadn't left his hand for the last 20 minutes. I'll meet them. I'll come, Nadia said. You don't. I know I don't have to, she said. I want to. He looked at her for a second. Boots fit? Yes. Then let's go. They met the trackers at the southern border as the last of the afternoon light was failing. 3 Ironblood wolves, big and efficient, led by a senior tracker named Dutch who Nadia recognized from 4 years of pack meetings. Dutch had always been professionally courteous to her. He had the look now of a man executing orders he found distasteful but would execute regardless. He stopped when he saw her. Then his eyes moved to Zane, to the territorial markers at the border, to the claiming documentation Zane held loosely at his side. Nadia Voss, Dutch said. Nadia Ashford, Zane said pleasantly. As of 2 hours ago, documented and recorded. Would you like to review the paperwork? I have copies. Dutch looked at the papers. His jaw worked silently through the implications. The Alpha won't accept this. The Alpha's acceptance isn't required under Section 12, Paragraph 4 of the Rogue Classification Act. Zane tilted his head. You're welcome to return and tell him that. I'd recommend bringing a copy of the law text. He may not be familiar with it. Dutch's eyes moved to Nadia. She met them steadily. Gave him nothing. He looked back at Zane. At the territorial marker. At the 2 Ashford warriors standing in quiet readiness at the tree line, carrying themselves the way people carry themselves when they could do considerable damage without raising their voices. This isn't over, Dutch said. Most things aren't, Zane agreed. Safe journey back. Dutch turned. The trackers left. The forest absorbed the sound of them in under a minute. Nadia released a breath she hadn't fully registered holding. You've done that before, she said. Sent trackers away? Defuse something without touching it, It's more efficient than the alternative. He turned back toward the pack house, the invitation implicit, and considerably less paperwork. Nadia looked once toward the south, toward the invisible line where Ironblood territory began, the walls she had lived inside for 3 years, the gates that had closed behind her this morning with the finality of a sentence being ended. Then she turned north and walked with Zane back into the warmth of the Ashford trees. Chapter 4. What healing looks like. The first month was the hardest. Not because of Cole. Not because of Sierra or Dutch or the formal notification from the Ironblood Elder Council declaring her status as rogue, a notification that arrived, was reviewed by Zane's legal counsel, was found to be legally void under 3 separate provisions of the old territorial law, and was filed in a drawer with the careful dismissiveness of someone processing junk mail. The hardest part of the first month was the silence inside her own head. She had expected the grief to come in waves. That was how people described it, waves, something oceanic and rhythmic that you could learn to brace for. What she got instead was a low, persistent frequency. A hum behind everything. The kind of pain that doesn't announce itself dramatically, but is simply always present, the way a bad knee is always present, modifying every step without ever fully stopping you. She had loved Cole. She needed to sit with that before she could move past it. Not the Cole who had stood on those steps without looking at her, but the Cole she had known at the beginning, the one who had sat with her in the forest the night they recognized each other as mates, and talked until the sun came up about everything and nothing, who had laughed at her jokes with his whole face, who had been, in those early months, someone she genuinely wanted to be near. That person had been real. Or real enough. Real enough to love. What he had become was the question she stopped asking around the 3rd week because she realized it didn't matter. The architecture of his failure wasn't something she needed to fully understand in order to leave it behind. He had made choices. The choices had consequences. She was the consequence and she was still standing. That was enough to work with. Training started on day 4. Nadia had expected to be given modified exercises. Something gentle, something designed around the pregnancy, the kind of careful accommodation that was really just a dressed-up version of being sidelined. What she got was Commander Vesh. Vesh was 40-something, female, built with the compact density of someone who had been moving weight her entire life, with close-cropped silver hair and a manner so direct it occasionally felt like a mild form of assault. She looked at Nadia on the first morning, assessed her in the particular way of experienced warriors, not just physical capacity, but the shape of how someone carries their uncertainty, where they brace, where they go soft, and said, "I hear you were a ranked warrior before you became someone's decoration." "I was never anyone's decoration," Nadia said. "Good. Then we don't have to unteach you that." Vesh handed her a wooden training blade. "The pregnancy changes your center of gravity. It does not change your capacity for damage. We train to what your body can do today, and we reassess every 2 weeks as that changes. You tell me when something hurts. Not hurts uncomfortable, that's the work. Hurts wrong. You understand the difference?" "Yes." "Show me your guard." Nadia raised the blade. Vesh adjusted her elbow a half-inch, her back foot a fraction wider, the angle of her chin 2 degrees lower. Each correction was wordless, a touch and a placement, precise as surgery. "Better," Vesh said. "Now, come at me." The law library was housed in a long room on the pack house's eastern wing, floor-to-ceiling shelves, a wide table for working, north-facing windows that kept the light cool and even. Nadia started spending her evenings there after the evening meal, working through the old territorial texts with the focused hunger of someone who has been kept from the actual levers of things for years and is making up for lost time. Zane came in on the 4th evening. He didn't announce himself or explain his presence. He pulled a chair to the far end of the table, opened his own volume, and worked. They sat in parallel silence for 2 hours. It was, Nadia found to her own mild surprise, one of the most comfortable 2 hours she'd experienced in recent memory. The border provision in the old Bloodmarked compact, she said eventually, without looking up. It hasn't been invoked in 60 years, but it's still active. "Yes," Zane said. Coldmark could use it to legally contest the Eastern markers if they wanted to. They'd have a legitimate claim. They'd have a legitimate claim under the original compact, yes. However, he pulled a second volume from the stack at his elbow and slid it down the table to her. Page 47. The amendment. She found the page. Read it. The amendment closes the window if the territory in question has been under continuous independent administration for more than 30 years. The Ashford sector has been under my administration for 32. So Coldmark knows about this. Coldmark's Alpha is not a patient man. He's been hoping I'd miss it. Nadia looked up. He's going to be disappointed. He already is. A pause. You found that in 4 evenings. I read quickly when the material matters. Zane looked at her across the length of the table. You would have been a remarkable Alpha. I know, Nadia said simply. She returned to her book. I'm going to be a remarkable something else instead. 6 weeks in, Marin cleared her for shifted combat training. The Bloodmarked, she explained, was creating an accelerated strengthening effect. The child's developing power creating a feedback loop with Nadia's own wolf, sharpening her senses, deepening her stamina, making her regenerate from training damage in a fraction of the usual time. You're going to be faster than you've ever been by the 3rd trimester, Marin said. Your wolf knows what she's carrying. She's preparing accordingly. Is that normal? None of this is normal, Marin said pleasantly. Normal is quite boring compared to you. In shifted training, Nadia discovered something she hadn't known about herself. She was not just good. She was genuinely, structurally gifted, the kind of natural fighting intelligence that training can refine but cannot create. Vesh identified it in the 3rd session and reported it to Zane with the careful neutrality of someone who wants to convey significant information without editorializing. Zane told Nadia directly, Vesh says you think 3 moves ahead without knowing you're doing it. That's not trainable. You were born with it. Cole never let me compete above junior circuit, Nadia said. He said it wasn't appropriate for a Luna to be seen fighting aggressively. Zane's expression did something controlled and brief. That's a thing someone says, he said, when they want to make sure you don't realize how dangerous you are. The evenings evolved. After the law library sessions, after Marin's check-ins and Vesh's training assessments, and the council briefings Zane had begun including her in as promised, there developed a habit of nothing formal, nothing arranged. Someone would end up at the kitchen table with something warm to drink. The other would appear at some point and sit down. They talked. About the territory, about law and strategy and the political chessboard of the northern packs. About Nadia's childhood in a small independent pack before she met Cole. About Zane's, the particular loneliness of running a neutral territory, belonging to no one's family of packs, trusted precisely because you had no allegiances and slightly suspected for the same reason. He didn't perform depth. He didn't offer vulnerability as a tactic. He simply said true things when they came up, and listened when she said them back, and didn't do anything with the information except hold it carefully. On a night 8 weeks in, when the wind was doing something theatrical against the packhouse windows and she had been quiet for longer than usual, he said, "It's allowed to hurt and be over at the same time." Nadia looked at him. "People act like healing is linear," he said. "Like you process something and then it's done and you're different. But you can be genuinely moving forward and still have mornings where it feels like starting from zero. Both things are true." "You sound like you're speaking from experience." "My predecessor left me this territory and a political situation that took 6 years to stabilize." A pause. "He also took 2 people I trusted with him when he left, and I spent a significant amount of time afterward being unable to tell the difference between actually recovering and just performing recovery adequately enough to keep leading." "How did you tell eventually?" "I stopped dreaming about it." He turned his cup. "Not that the dream stopped. Just that when they happened, I woke up and thought about them for a minute, and then got up and made coffee. They became something that had happened rather than something that was still happening." Nadia was quiet for a moment. "I dreamed about the pendant last night," she said. Sierra's face when she was wearing it. "But when I woke up, I thought, she can keep it. It doesn't mean what it meant. It's just metal and a meaning he assigned." "That's the beginning," Zane said. "Of what?" of it becoming something that happened. Chapter 5. The Message. 7 months in, the pregnancy was visible and undeniable and glorious. Nadia had stopped trying to dress around it 3 months ago. She wore the bump openly, practically, with the same no-ceremony approach she'd adopted for everything in the Ashford sector. Marin had given up pretending to be professionally neutral about it weeks ago and now simply beamed every time she entered a room. The child moved constantly. Strong, purposeful movements. Not the fluttery uncertainty of early pregnancy, but the deliberate shifts of a creature testing what its body could do, exploring the boundaries of its world before it had seen it yet. Nadia found herself talking to the child during training, during law library sessions, during the quiet mornings before the pack house woke. She told the child about the territory. About Vesh and Marin and Ryan, who had arrived 6 weeks ago carrying a single bag and a letter of resignation from Ironblood that had apparently made Cole put his fist through a wall. About the old pines and the north-facing library windows and the way the pack house smelled of wood smoke every evening from October onward. She did not talk about Cole. Not yet. Not to the child. She had promised herself and Zane both that the truth would be available when the child was ready for it. But right now the child was growing in warmth and the warmth didn't need a footnote. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Handwritten. No pack seal. Slipped into the general correspondence bundle by a courier who had accepted it from an anonymous source in the neutral postal exchange 2 towns south. Nadia recognized the handwriting before she registered who it was from. The small, round script she had known for 7 years, the particular way the letters leaned slightly right as if they couldn't wait to reach the end of the sentence. Sierra. She sat down before she opened it. 3 sentences. The page barely a quarter filled. His pup died at 4 months. He knows it was never the bloodline. He knows what he threw away. He's coming for you, Nadia. He's not coming to apologize. He's coming to take. I'm sorry. For everything. I thought he loved me. I was just a replacement. Now I have nothing. Nadia read it 3 times. She set it on the table. She sat for a while in the quiet of the library, the late afternoon light coming flat and gray through the north windows, and she thought about Sierra. About 7 years of genuine friendship, the kind built in small moments, shared jokes, late nights, the particular intimacy of knowing someone well enough to predict exactly how they will react to news before you've finished delivering it. She thought about the moment Sierra had looked her in the eye at breakfast the morning of the banishment and said, "You look beautiful today, Nadia," while wearing the pendant beneath her collar. She waited for hatred. For the particular hot rush of it that she'd expected to feel if this moment ever came. What came instead was something quieter and more final. Pity. Brief and genuine. And then nothing much. Sierra had made her choices in the same way Cole had made his. Believing the short-term arithmetic would work out, believing that what they were taking was worth the cost of taking it. They had both been wrong in the same fundamental way. They had both mistaken Nadia's warmth for weakness and her patience for acceptance and her love for an infinite resource that required no maintenance. The nothing much, Nadia realized, was closure. Unmistakable. A door swinging shut on its own weight. "You're very still," Zane said from the doorway. "I received a letter." He crossed the room, sat across from her. She slid the paper to him. He read it without expression, then set it down. "What do you feel?" he asked. "Nothing, for her," Nadia said. She chose what she chose. She pressed her hand lightly to the movement beneath her ribs, the child shifting in what felt remarkably like agreement. "For me? Yes. Ready." The word came out solid and true, no performance in it, no forced certainty. Just a fact she'd arrived at so gradually she hadn't noticed until it was simply where she lived now. "Whatever he brings, I'm ready for it." Zane looked at her for a long moment. The amber eyes steady and warm in the gray afternoon light. "Then we prepare," he said. "Properly." "Yes." He picked up the letter, folded it once, set it aside. "And Nadia. Sierra's sorry doesn't require anything from you. Not forgiveness, not acknowledgement, not a response. It can simply exist and you can do nothing with it. That's allowed. Nadia looked at him. I know, she said. She did know. She had known it the moment she'd read the letter. But there was something in having it said plainly by someone who meant it that settled the knowledge into a different layer, bone deep rather than just mind known. Thank you, she said. He nodded once, the way he always did when something was meant and didn't require expansion. The preparation took 4 days. Zane's intelligence network, built quietly over 2 years of patience and precise information exchange, reported Cole's movement on day 2. He was traveling with Elder Holt and 2 senior warriors. He had, as Marin had predicted, filed a biological paternity claim with the Interpack Legal Authority, an ancient document that, if accepted, would give him legal standing to claim the child at birth. Can he use it? Nadia asked in the council room, surrounded by Zane's 3 senior advisors and Vesh, who had invited herself and been allowed to stay. He can attempt to file it, said Kasha, Zane's legal counsel, 50, sharp, with the precise speech patterns of someone who had spent decades making language do exactly what she needed it to. However, the biological paternity claim has a provision that most alphas haven't read because most alphas don't expect to need it. She turned a page. The claim is only valid if the biological mother holds no current pack affiliation. Rogue status, exile, or independent wolf classification, all valid grounds. However, if the mother is formally claimed, Nadia said. The claim dies, Kasha confirmed. Completely. There is no appeal mechanism under old law. He knows this, Zane said. He's not coming for the legal document. That's a prop. Then what's he coming for? Vesh asked. Nadia answered. He's coming to see if I'll break. If standing in front of him again undoes everything I've built in the last 7 months. He wants to see if I'm still the woman he left in the rain. The room was quiet. Are you? Kasha asked. Not unkindly. No, Nadia said. She said it the way you state the weather. Plainly. Without needing it confirmed. On the morning of Cole's expected arrival, Nadia stood in front of the mirror in her chambers. She had stopped looking in mirrors for the first month. Not from vanity wound, but from the disorientation of not recognizing what she saw. The woman in the mirror in those early weeks had still been carrying the courtyard in her posture, the banishment in the set of her jaw. The woman in the mirror this morning was different. She was 7 months pregnant, and she stood like it was the most natural form of power she'd ever held. Her dark hair was back and clean. She wore Ashford colors, dark blue and gray. Simple clothes, well made, no ornamentation. Her wolf was fully present behind her eyes, awake and steady, no longer wounded or frantic, but settled the way deep water settles. She touched the claiming mark at her throat. She thought about the pendant. Sierra could keep it. She didn't need it. She had something better. She had herself, fully assembled, standing in territory that was hers, preparing to face a man who had made the worst decision of his life and was only now beginning to understand the cost. A knock at the door. He's at the border, Ryan said from the hallway. Zane's bringing them in. I'll be down in a minute, Nadia said. She looked at herself once more. This is the last time you're afraid of him, she told her reflection. After today, he's just someone who used to matter. The child moved. A strong, certain kick. I know, she said to it, almost smiling. I know. Let's go. Chapter 6. The Reckoning. Cole looked wrong in the Ashford Hall. That was the first thing Nadia noticed as he walked through the doors, not the gauntness she'd been told about, not the dark circles, or the diminished bearing, or any of the specific details Ryan's intelligence had prepared her for. What she noticed was how wrong he looked in this space. Ironblood's pack house had been built for impression, high ceilings, formal lines, every surface chosen for its ability to communicate power. Cole had always fit inside it perfectly. He had been made for impressive rooms. The Ashford meeting hall was warm and honest and direct, built from old stone and good timber, lit by actual fire rather than cold overhead light. It was a room that had no patience for performance. Cole looked like a man standing in a place that wouldn't hold his weight. He stopped when he saw Nadia. She was standing at the near end of the long oak table, not behind it. Beside it, in the open space, no furniture between them. She had made that decision deliberately. She was not hiding behind anything today. Zane stood 4 feet to her right. Not in front of her. Beside her. Equal and steady, his hands loose at his sides, his expression carrying the watchful calm of someone prepared for every version of what might happen next. Ryan stood near the door. The 2 Ashford senior warriors flanked the windows. Elder Holt entered behind Cole, with 2 Ironblood warriors who stopped just inside the door at Zane's quiet request and didn't argue. Cole looked at Nadia. She watched him take her in all of her, the pregnancy, the claiming mark, the Ashford colors, the way she was standing, and she watched something in his face do something complicated and private and too late. Nadia, he said. His voice was the same. She had not been certain how she would feel about that. She had wondered, during the 7 months, whether the sound of his voice would dismantle something. Whether biology and history would collude to make her smaller in his presence. It didn't. She heard her name in his voice and felt distance. A clear, clean distance, like standing on a bank looking at a river that had once been so close it could sweep you away, seeing now how narrow it actually was. Alpha Voss, she said. Her voice came out the way she'd needed it to. Not cold, not performed, simply level. You've traveled a long way. Say what you came to say. Cole stepped forward. Elder Holt made a movement of protest and stopped himself. The warriors by the door shifted. I came to ask you to come home, Cole said. The hall was completely quiet. Sierra lied to me, he continued. The pregnancy was false. The bloodline claims, the council vote, she manipulated all of it, Nadia. I was deceived. I need you to understand that. I do understand it, Nadia said. I also understand that Sierra couldn't have built that deception without your willingness to believe it. That you chose to believe I was unfaithful rather than ask me. That you stripped my title and declared me rogue and sent trackers after me rather than consider the possibility that you were wrong. I was wrong, Cole said. I know that. I'm standing here telling you I was wrong. Yes, Nadia said. You are. A pause. What would you like me to do with that? Cole's jaw worked. The Ironblood Alpha, accustomed to the particular social gravity of his position, the way rooms reorganized themselves toward him, the way people's faces changed when he spoke, looked at her and found nothing reorganizing itself. She was simply standing there, looking back at him, asking a reasonable question. Come home, he said again. I'll restore your title. I'll make a formal public statement about what happened. I'll tell the council the truth about Sierra's deception. You'll be Luna again, fully and completely, and I will spend however long it takes making this right. And the child, Nadia said. Something crossed Cole's face. He looked at the visible curve of her pregnancy, and she watched the math happening behind his eyes, the same math she had known he would eventually do, the same math that had been circling toward this moment for 7 months. The child is mine, Cole said quietly. Not an accusation. A realization. A man arriving at the edge of something he had broken and looking down at the full depth of it for the first time. The child, Nadia said, is an Ashford heir. Formally claimed, legally documented, and growing up in a territory where they are already loved. Biologically. You filed a rogue declaration, Kasha said from the corner, her voice carrying the pleasant finality of a judgment being read. Section 14 of the Biological Paternity Act, which you cited in your claim to the Interpack Authority, states clearly that biological paternity claim is void where rogue classification has been contested and overturned under Section 12. Your claim was overturned the day Nadia was claimed under Ashford protection. Holt made a sound. Kasha looked at him pleasantly and he stopped making it. Cole looked at Nadia. You knew I'd come, he said. Yes. You prepared for this. Yes. A silence that had real weight. I was already pregnant when you banished me, Nadia said. Her voice was still level. She had decided she was not going to make this a performance. She was not going to build to a speech or a dramatic revelation or a moment calibrated for maximum impact. She was simply going to say what was true, plainly, and let the truth do what truth does. I was 6 weeks along when you stood on those steps and didn't look at me. When you let Elder Holt call me a rogue wolf. When you chose the version of events that was convenient over the version that was true. Cole's face did something she didn't have a word for. Not guilt exactly, guilt has an element of surprise to it, the shock of discovering you have done wrong. This was something past guilt. The expression of a man who has known, somewhere underneath everything, and has been moving faster and faster trying to stay ahead of the knowing. I didn't know, he said. No, Nadia agreed. You didn't. And that doesn't make you less responsible. It makes you more. She took a breath. You made decisions based on what was convenient and comfortable and politically useful, and you made them so quickly and with such certainty that you didn't leave room for the possibility of being wrong. And because of that, you threw away the most significant thing you'll ever have before you even knew it existed. Then let me fix it, Cole said. His voice cracked on the last word. The first fracture in the performance of composure, something real breaking through. Please. I'll do anything. I'll dissolve the pack leadership. I'll restructure the council. I'll exile Sierra permanently. Just tell me what you need from me and I'll do it. Nadia looked at him. She looked at him the way you look at something you have fully understood and fully moved beyond, with a completeness that had no room left for anger or longing or the complex gravity of unfinished things. I don't need anything from you, Cole, she said. That's what you don't understand. That's what you came here expecting not to be true. Nadia, you thought if you stood in front of me and said the right things, there would still be enough left in me that was yours to pull. That the history between us would be leverage. She shook her head slowly. But you burned the leverage when you signed the papers. There's nothing left to pull on. Cole was very still. Then what happens now? He asked. Now, Nadia said, I tell you the only thing I came here to say. She descended, unhurried, the room holding completely still around her. She stopped 6 feet from him, close enough to see the full detail of what 7 months of consequence looked like on a face she had once known better than her own. You're going to go back to Ironblood, she said quietly. You're going to lead it. And every day, for the rest of your life, you are going to know that you rejected the most powerful wolf born in this generation before you knew she existed. You are going to watch your territory diminish while your child grows up in another man's land and becomes something extraordinary. You will hear about it because these things travel. You will hear every achievement, every step, every proof of what you threw away, and you will have to carry the knowledge that it was not fate or circumstance or the moon goddess's design that brought you to this moment. She held his gaze. It was Tuesday morning decisions. Small cruelties. The choice to believe what was easy over what was true. A pause. That is your punishment, Cole. Not exile. Not public humiliation. Just the truth. Every day. For the rest of your life. Cole's legs bent. He caught the edge of the table with one hand, not collapsing, but held up only by the insistence of his body against what his spirit was doing. I'm sorry, he said. The words were rough and unstructured, stripped of the dignity he'd arrived with. I'm sorry, Nadia. I know it doesn't. It doesn't, she agreed. But I accept it anyway. Not for you. Because carrying the unaccepted apology of someone who hurt me is more weight than I'm willing to walk around with. She stepped back. This audience is over, Zane said. Not loudly. He didn't need volume. Holt put a hand on Cole's arm. Cole stood there for one more moment, looking at Nadia with the expression of a man who has just understood the precise and irreversible dimensions of a door that has closed. Then he turned and walked out. Holt followed. The warriors followed. The door shut. The hall was quiet. Nadia stood in the middle of it, the child moving beneath her ribs, steady and strong and completely unbothered by everything that had just occurred. She placed her hand there, not protectively this time. Just present. Just connected. She felt Zane move to stand beside her. He didn't say anything. He simply stood there in the quiet, present the way he was always present, not performing comfort, not managing her reaction, just there. After a moment, she said, It's smaller than I thought it would be. The confrontation? The closure. She looked at her hand on her stomach. I spent 7 months thinking about it, and it was just a conversation. He said words and I said words, and now it's over. Most of the things we build into mountains, Zane said, turn out to be hills. She was quiet for a moment. I don't feel triumphant. No, I feel finished. Like the last chapter of something. That's better than triumph, Zane said. Triumph fades. Finished means you can start something new. Nadia looked at him. He was looking ahead, toward the doors, the amber eyes quiet and warm. Zane. Yes. When you said this stopped being pretend for you. She felt her heart doing something steady and unhurried. When did that actually start? He was quiet for a moment. The evening in the law library, he said. When you found the Colemark Amendment in 4 days and handed it back to me like it was obvious. And I thought, she is going to be remarkable at this. At all of it. That was 6 months ago. Yes, you waited 6 months. You needed 6 months, he said simply. Timing matters. Nadia looked at him for a long time. At the careful honesty of his face. At the man who had offered her an umbrella after the rain stopped and meant something real by it, who had agreed to every condition without negotiation, who had sat at the other end of a table in companionable silence and called it enough. Ask me, she said. Not in a year. Now. Ask me. Zane turned to face her. Would you stay? He asked. Not because of the law or the child or the territory. Just, would you stay? With me. Yes, Nadia said. One word. Plainly meant. The same way he said things. The child moved, emphatic and conclusive. Zane laughed, the same startled, genuine laugh she had heard the first time the child kicked under his hand, surprised out of him before he could manage it. The Bloodmark has opinions, he said. The Bloodmark always has opinions, Nadia agreed. She's going to be impossible. Nadia had not said that before. Had been careful not to, had kept the pronoun neutral for 7 months at Marin's gentle medical advice. She hadn't decided to say it now. It had simply arrived, fully known. Nadia confirmed. Zane looked at her hand on her stomach. At the slight, certain movement beneath it. He placed his hand over hers. Both of them over the child. The way you hold something extraordinary that you don't want to hold too tightly. She's going to be extraordinary, he said. She already is, Nadia said. Epilogue. A year from then. 1 year later, Ashford Sector had a new sound. It was a high, bright, wholly unreasonable sound, the laugh of a child who had recently discovered that laughter produced results and had decided to deploy it broadly and without restraint. It came from the courtyard most mornings, where Zane had taken to spending the first hour after dawn crouched on the stone with his daughter, narrating the world to her in the unhurried way he narrated everything, while she regarded him with amber eyes that saw considerably more than they should at 10 months old and occasionally demonstrated this by looking at something he hadn't noticed yet. Her name was Iris. She had Nadia's dark hair, just enough of it to confirm the intention, and Zane's amber eyes, which Marin had predicted with the confidence of someone who had been reading bloodlines for 40 years. She also had, as Marin had promised and as the entire Ashford sector had now witnessed firsthand, the particular quality of the Bloodmarked, a presence in a room that was difficult to describe and impossible to ignore. Pack members who had never held a child before found themselves crossing rooms to sit near her. Wolves who had never been especially interested in the pack house found reasons to be in the courtyard in the mornings. Vesh, who had been known for 30 years for a comprehensive lack of sentimentality, had been found in the library last week reading to Iris from a territorial law text. When Nadia had appeared in the doorway, Vesh had closed the book and looked at her without expression and said, she was making a sound at the door. I was passing. It seemed practical. Of course, Nadia had said seriously. Good fighting instincts, Vesh had added. Even at 10 months. The way she grabs. That's grip strength. Absolutely, Nadia had agreed. Ryan arrived on a bright cold morning, 6 weeks after Cole's visit, carrying a single bag and a sealed letter. The bag was larger than last time. The letter was his formal resignation from Ironblood Pack, written in the careful, precise hand of a man who had spent considerable time on each word. He handed it to Nadia in the kitchen. She read it. Set it down. Sit down, she said. You're home. Ryan sat down. He pressed one hand over his face for a moment. Not crying exactly, but something adjacent to it, something in the shape of a man who has been carrying a weight for so long that putting it down feels like a physical event. How is it? He asked. Ironblood. Ryan lowered his hand. His expression did the thing of a person deciding how honest to be and landing on completely. 3 neighboring packs have filed border disputes, he said. 2 senior council members resigned last month. Cole he's leading, but it's a pause. He came back from here and told the pack the truth about Sierra. All of it. I think he thought confession would help. It did and it didn't. And Sierra? She left. Nobody knows where. Nadia absorbed this. She looked at the window, the morning light, the territory that was hers now in every genuine sense. She felt nothing particular about Sierra. What she had told Sierra's letter was true. That door had closed. It was simply information now, weather report from a place she no longer lived. What about him, she asked. Ryan understood what she was asking. He's functioning, he said carefully. He leads the pack. He makes decisions. He gets up every morning and does the work. A pause. But there's something missing. Like the part of him that used to be certain about things isn't certain anymore. Good, Nadia said. Then, hearing herself, not cruel good. Just. A man who moves through the world certain of everything, certain he can take without consequence, certain that the people he hurts will absorb it and continue, that man needs to lose his certainty. It's the only education available to him. Ryan nodded slowly. He asked about the child. Through official channels. Proper protocol, nothing aggressive. Just asked if she was well. Nadia was quiet for a moment. She looked at Iris, who was currently in the courtyard below the window, sitting in the grass with Zane's hands hovering 2 inches from her sides in case, examining a fallen leaf with the intensity of a scholar encountering a primary source. She's well, Nadia said. You can tell him that. That evening, after Iris was asleep and the pack house had settled into its night sounds, Nadia stood at the bedroom window and looked out at the Ashford forest. The dark pines, the old growth, the deep and unhurried landscape that had been a stranger to her a year ago and was now as familiar as breathing. Zane appeared in the doorway. He had, in the year since the claiming ceremony, stopped knocking on the door that connected their chambers. She hadn't asked him to. He had simply arrived at the decision on his own one evening, and she had registered the absence of the knock with a feeling she hadn't immediately identified and then had said nothing because it required nothing. He stood beside her at the window. They were quiet for a while. Below, a pack member crossed the yard with a lantern, the light making a warm circle on the dark ground. In the distance, an owl said something and the forest answered in rustles. Ryan is staying, Nadia said. I know. I offered him the border management role this afternoon. He said yes. Was that your decision or mine? Ours, Zane said. The way things are now. Nadia leaned against his shoulder. He was warm and solid and entirely present, and she had decided some months ago to stop qualifying how she felt about that. Stopped noting it with the mental asterisk of this is not what you expected. This is not what you planned. Stopped treating genuine feeling like a thing that required examination before it was permitted. It was permitted. It was real. It was the most uncomplicated true thing in a life that had contained considerable complication. She's going to ask about him eventually, Nadia said. Cole. Yes. I've been thinking about what I'll say. What have you landed on? The truth, Nadia said. Simply, that he was her biological father, that he and I were not meant to last, that he made mistakes and lived with them, that she came from all of that and became something far greater than any of it. A pause. And that the man who raised her chose her every single day, without reservation, not because biology required it, but because she was worth choosing. She felt Zane go still in the way that meant something had landed. That's generous, he said. To Cole. It's honest, Nadia said. He made mistakes. So did I, not the ones he accused me of, but others. Staying too long in something that wasn't healthy because I wanted it to be. Mistaking intensity for love. She looked out at the forest. I don't want Iris to have a villain for a biological father. I want her to have a flawed person who made bad choices and bore their consequences. That's a more useful story. Zane was quiet for a moment. You've grown into something remarkable, he said. I was always remarkable, Nadia said. I was just planted in the wrong soil. She felt him look at her. Then she felt him smile. She could tell by the way the shoulder she was leaning against shifted. "I know where I've heard that before," he said. "Marin. She told me when I first arrived, and I wasn't ready to believe it yet." Nadia looked up at the stars that were beginning to appear through the pine canopy. Funny how the truest things take time to land. From down the hall came the small, unconcerned sound of Iris resettling in her sleep. A sigh, a brief movement, then silence again. Both of them turned toward the sound automatically, the instinctive parenthood of people who have learned a child's nighttime vocabulary and know the difference between the sounds that need response and the ones that are simply the noise of a healthy creature dreaming. This was a dreaming sound. They both released a breath at the same time and then looked at each other. "She's going to be impossible," Zane said. "Extraordinarily impossible," Nadia agreed. "I'm looking forward to it," he said. She took his hand. Outside, the Ashford pines moved in a slow wind off the northern mountains, a long and easy sound, the sound of old things continuing. The full moon was 3 days away, and already the light was gathering in the sky with the particular quality of the moon building to something. Silver and patient and certain. Nadia looked up at it. She had stopped being angry at the moon goddess somewhere around month 3. Stopped the particular wounded bargaining of "Why would you design this? Why would you let this happen? What kind of plan requires this much pain?" Standing here now, with Iris asleep down the hall and Zane's hand solid in hers, and the territory spread out below in the moonlight. Her territory, hers in every way that mattered, built from the rubble of something she'd survived, she understood the design. Not because suffering had a purpose in itself. Not because the pain had been necessary or deserved or fated. But because she had found out, on the worst morning of her life, what she was actually made of. And she never would have known if the worst morning hadn't come. She was made of spite and survival and the refusal to stay down. She was made of law books read in north-facing windows and training yards at dawn, and the fierce, particular love of a woman who decides to build a life rather than wait for one to be handed to her. She was made of everything they had called weakness and discovered, too late, was the opposite. She let go of Zane's hand and pressed both palms to the window glass, looking up at the gathering moon. "Thank you," she said quietly. To the night. To the design she still didn't fully understand. To the version of herself who had walked out of those gates in a ruined white dress with a pregnancy test in her pocket and chosen, in the mud and the spite of it, to keep going. "Thank you for the wrong soil," she said. "I needed to find my own." The moon came out from behind the last cloud. It lit everything. The end. If this story lived in you, if you felt every rain-soaked step, every courtroom silence, every morning in the law library, then you already know what to do. Subscribe and hit that bell, loves, because the next story is coming and I promise you, you are not ready. Drop a comment telling me, what was the moment you knew Nadia had already won, even before the confrontation? I want to know. I read every single one. And remember this, because I mean it, you are not what they called you when they left. You are what you built after. Stay fierce. Stay whole.